and welcome to the MyClayCo studio. My name is Carla and today I'm going to be taking you through how to use molds with your polymer clay creations. Now over the years I have picked up a couple of tips and tricks on how to best utilize molds and also how to care for them. Even though molds are generally made of silicone, not all silicones are created equally. So there are a couple of differences in some of the molds that you'll see in the market, and I'll go through how to care for them properly and use them with your polymer clay. Let's get into it. So I've got an assortment of molds here. They are all ones that we stock and we use ourselves, but I have ranged them from the softest to the firmest, and you'll notice that in the price point too. These ones are cheaper and then you'll start getting more expensive. So this is Sculpey and Cernit branded ones. So they do use the firmer, more satiny type silicone, and they are really nice to work with, but if your budget doesn't allow for it, then these ones are also great, and there's so many designs in these ones that you can work into your polymer clay creations. Now the easiest way to work with a silicone mold is to simply get your preconditioned clay and press it into the mold itself. Now I will say if you're doing it this way, you'll get decent results. It will still come out, but some of the details aren't quite there. So instead what we do is we get a little bit of our polymer clay, and I actually take a ball tool. So depending on what size you would change out your ball tool. I'm going to use this one because it fits nicely with the leaf, and I'm just going to get enough polymer clay that it's actually going to fit in there, and then I'm just going to lightly press it into that leaf mold. So what this is doing is ensuring that I'm pressing down into all of those little detailed nooks and crannies, and also using the ball tool means I'm not actually getting any warmth from my finger, because sometimes the warmth, it can actually stick to the clay and pull it away from the mold, which is not what you want. So as I said, the softer ones are easier to unmold because they are stretchy. So as soon as I start stretching it, you can see it's already going to be pulling out of that mold. So I just push slightly, peel it out, and that's a lovely little leaf. Now what you'll notice with this one is the leaf is quite thick. So if I actually wanted to use this as a leaf embellishment, it's a little bit too thick for my liking. So for us to get a thinner one, we actually don't have to fill the mold all the way. So this was the piece of clay that I used previously to fill it. So let's just see what it's like if I put half the amount of clay in. Again, I take my ball tool and I'm just going to systematically work it in. Okay, now I can take that one out. So same leaf imprint, but you'll notice that it's much thinner than my previous one was. You can especially see it's almost transparent through the light in that center part. So this would be really good for if you just wanted to add a little leaf embellishment to something, but not actually have it as a really thick piece of clay on your polymer clay creation. I'm just going to quickly show you this too. So if I was to take that small bit of clay and try and squish it in with my finger, you can see it's wanting to stick to my finger because I do run quite hot. So even though I can press it in, at times it wants to come back with me. So that's why I say use some kind of tool, because you don't want to be fiddling around with it getting stuck to your fingers too much. So that was the softest of the molds and probably the least amount of detailing out of all of the molds. So I'll pop that one to the side and I'll get into our second firmest here. This is actually my favorite flower to use as embellishments. It's beautiful and the detailing on it really comes out in polymer clay. So as you can see, it's got a bit of fluff on it. So all I do is I just wipe it with a baby wipe, and I just make sure that it's nice and clean before I start putting clay in it. So I'm going to be putting clay in this one, but the next tip I'm going to show you is how to actually add two different colours into the one clay mould. So a lot of the time people think, okay, I've got a little flower stain in there, so I need to fill that one with a little ball of clay and then put my clay in. If you do that though, you can sometimes get the clay squish over the edges and you won't get a nice clean line. So what I do say is to actually get, again, a little ball tool and just make sure that it's really squished in with that one single colour, and it's not actually going to overflow that dark purple out to where I'm going to be putting the light pink, and to make sure that it's in all of the gaps. So then I take my preconditioned pink. Now this one, you don't want to be pressing it in and out because it can pull the purple out. So I take a ball tool. I'm actually going to use this one at the start. I'm going to press it in, and then I'm going to start fanning it out. Now it's at this point, if you did want a thinner profile, I would probably take that one out because as you can see, it's not all the way up to the top. But if you did want to have this as, say, like a standalone stud, you could then infill more. Even better, if you wanted to embed your stud into it, there are two different ways that you can do it from this point. The first one would be to take your post and place it on your flower, and then you can either cover that with more polymer clay and pop it out and bake it, or you could actually fill this with liquid clay. And so that would be one of the reasons why I would put this directly in the oven. If I'm going to be putting liquid clay to help embed my post, I don't want to be then taking my flower out of the mould, because then liquid clay is going to go everywhere. So you would have to bake it in the mould. So you can bake in silicone molds, much like if you were to use silicone baking things like baking mats or the little silicone cake tins. You can actually bake silicone up to certain temperatures. So with polymer clay, because we bake it at quite a low temperature, most of them are fine for putting in your oven. However, if you are buying them from a cheaper website, you may want to look into the actual manufacturer's details or ask the question, do you know if this silicone is oven safe? If you're really unsure, I would definitely err on the side of caution and not put it in your oven where you will be cooking food, just because if you're unsure, it's never really safe to put it in your oven, and especially an oven that you're going to be eating things from. So definitely check that they are okay to go in the oven before you do that. That's my big disclaimer. Most of the ones for polymer clay, like Cernit Molds, any of the Sculpey Molds, they're all fine to go in the oven. They are made for polymer clay, so they are made to be baked in the oven. So generally with molds, you can press into them and then pull the piece out. I find that the easiest because it means I can make multiple at a time. But if you did actually want to bake in the mold and not take it out, you can just place it either on your baking rack or on a tile. Any way that you would normally bake your polymer clay pieces, you just sit your silicone mold with your clay in it and it will bake as per the packet instructions. I will say that you can also add liquid clay to your silicone molds, which is one of the reasons why people do actually bake them in the oven, is because obviously you can't demold raw liquid clay, you would need to bake it first. But there are some key differences with baking liquid clay and baking polymer clay, so I'll go through those later in the video as well. So I want to try and make 2 pairs of these earrings today, so I need to keep pulling them in and out, so I'm just going to embed with polymer clay. So I find the easiest way is just to kind of smush it a little bit and then work it over. And then again, I take my ball tool and I just start smushing it. Now with this one, you may actually end up having to cut a bit of excess off the top, but we'll see how we go once we get more into our mold. Okay, I'm just checking here. You can see that I don't have any overhang out of my mold, and I'm just firmly pressing that on top of my post. So now all I need to do to remove that one is, again, it's a softer mold, so I can just lightly stretch those edges. And then because I have the post on it, it's easier for me to actually remove. And as you can see, I've got that beautiful purple on the center and then the pink around the rest of it, and it's fully embedded. So I can actually bake that one, and that's a completed earring right there. Okay, this next one I'm going to show you is probably our firmest mold before we start getting into the Sculpey and Cernit branded ones. And I just want to show you using this one. It's quite a deep shell that we're going to be doing. So it is firmer and it is a deep imprint. So there is a chance that our clay can grip in there. So something else that you can do is you can actually put a release agent onto your mold before you use it. So again, I'm just going to use a baby wipe to quickly wipe that one out, make sure that there's no fluff or dust anywhere. And then while that's drying, I've got my preconditioned clay here. It's just some scrap clay because I'm actually going to be using mica powder as a release agent. So this is going to actually completely coat our clay. So this is also great for if you're using scrap clay, because you can kind of cover it in whatever pigment or mica powder you want, and it doesn't really matter what color clay is underneath. So this one should be air dry now. So all I'm going to be doing is putting my release agent into the mold. And oh, this is going to be really pretty. So I'm just making sure that I'm not leaving too much excess in there. It just needs to be a thin layer in all of the little gaps here, just to make sure that it's not going to, my clay isn't going to get caught on anything. Okay, that's infilled. So I just move that to the side and I can start actually pressing this in. So again, I get my ball tool, and I'm just going to be pressing that into all of the little gaps. I always find that clay doesn't really stick to metal when it's moving. So if I was to just press down and lift, my clay runs the risk of coming up. Whereas if I roll over it, I don't really have that risk. Now I am one who prefers to try and put the right amount of clay into my mold and then flatten the top. You can also press down with a clay press or something else flat to make sure it is really nice and flat. I have seen people actually come in with a blade and cut the excess off, but depending on the silicone, you can actually cut into your silicone mold, so it's not best for the longevity of your mold. Now, because this one has got the gold on the front, I'm actually also going to put it on the back, just so that it's going to be completely covered in gold, and I'll probably have to put a little bit of extra gold on the part that's imprinted too. We'll just see how we go. Okay, and again to release, just slowly prying that away and pressing out. And as you can see, I've got beautiful detailing there. There is a little bit of overflow over the edges. You can either press those in or sand them once they're baked. But as I said, I have got a little bit of this one that doesn't have the gold on it. So I'm just going to go back over it. This would be great if you did want to have some of the imprints not fully covered in mica powder. You could have those imprints darker. If you say did a black clay and then you put the gold on, you'd be able to have those black edges. I want the whole thing to be gold though. And there we have it, a beautiful gold little shell. Now, once you're done, you can clean it out with a baby wipe. If you are finding some of the little gaps a little difficult to get into, you can always wash it under some hot soapy water, and that will get everything off of it as well. You just want to make sure that you are drying it in a space that isn't going to be collecting dust once it's actually dried. Okay, so now I'm onto the Sculpey mold. So as I said, this is a firmer and more satiny finished mold, so it doesn't actually stick to your clay as much. So you definitely don't need release agents. However, it also means that your clay can come away quite easily. You can even see here though, if I stamp it in, it actually stamps an imprint really nicely onto that one. But again, we take our conditioned clay. We're going to see if we can get just enough to fill it, and then we start rolling over with our ball tool. So this is a firmer silicone, so it's much more comfortable to actually use a blade to clean up on these ones than it is those other ones. As you can see, I've got a little bit of overflow there. So I'm just going to grab a blade, and then I'm going to show you, if you did want to slice, to actually slice over the top of it. So important when we're slicing with our blade, we don't want our blade at an angle at all. We want to try and keep it as flush and flat with the mold as possible. So you can actually lay it on the mold and try and shimmy from there, but you are going to get a little bit stuck and you'll probably only take part of it off. So what I find is easier is if you are at a very, very slight angle and you kind of just shimmy back and forth. And I'm just shaving that excess off. Once that excess is off, you can flatten with your finger just to make sure that it's really nice and flat on the back. And then this is where we can pull it out. So as you can see, it's not as easy. I'm pulling it. It's not coming away from the clay as easily as the other ones. So this one, I'm actually going to be pushing on the back here as well as pulling the sides away. And you can see that that's starting to actually push it out. And then I pull that one, and that is a adorable little leaf. So as you can see, the imprint is really true to mold. It's really going to come out really nice and clean and clear. And it's quite thin compared to the other ones, which can be a little bit deeper, so a little bit trickier to try and get this kind of outcome. So I thought I'd just do a little side-by-side comparison of the leaf molds that we just did. So as you can see, the squishier one doesn't hold as much detail, like the fine lines that you can get with the much more expensive Sculpey ones, but that's, I guess, what you're paying for in the more expensive and firmer ones, is you can get this fine line detail. Not all projects will need fine line detailing, but if you did really want that super fine detail, then you're much better off spending the money on a Sculpey or a Cernit mold than any of the others. But if you're just using them for embellishments, especially with 3D floral making or anything that you're putting on slabs, then these ones work really, really well, and they're super affordable. So the last one here is, of course, the Cernit mold. So this one is actually one of my favorite molds to use. It's just beautiful and really nice and firm. And as you can see, like no fluff or lint or anything sticks on the surface of it. So it's really easy and clean to work with. So I am going to go through how to do dual tone again, but I might actually see if I can do 3 different colors in this one, because I've actually got that little step up on the corner. So I'll do a center color, and then I'll do a color on that second layer, and then a final infill, and we'll see how we go. So as I said before, if I just try and get a ball and put it in the center, I run the risk of it spilling out once my other clay is pressed in. So you can see there, it's just going outside the lines. So you want to almost create a cup. So you take off more clay than what you'd think, and you just put a really small amount in. Like, I still think that's too much. You don't want it to be any higher than the top of the lip of whatever area you're putting it into. So see how that doesn't look like it's going to be enough clay? That 100% will be the right amount of clay. So I'm just taking my little one here, and I'm just taking it to the edges. It's almost like a mold within a mold. I just want to make sure that I'm just filling that little bit there, and it's slightly cupped in the center, so that if I'm pushing clay down onto it, no clay is going to spill over. That is this yellow color, because I haven't got any excess lumped in the middle here. So if I'm really pedantic about it, I'll take off a little bit more clay, just to make sure that I'm not getting too much in the center. That will be perfect. Onto the second color. Now, at times you might need to pull a needle tool in to make sure that you're really sticking within the lines of that mold, because I don't want any spillover into my other color. Alrighty, I've got my yellow in the center. I've just filled in with red, and now to go in with my final color. It doesn't matter if this isn't completely flat, because all that matters is that the back is flat. Okay, and in with our final color. Okay, so I've got that one. Again, this is a firm mold, so we can run our blade across it without worrying too much. I will say just work slowly and in bits. Don't try and slice through the whole thing. As you can see, it can start lifting up in places. So we just want to make sure that we're being really cautious with it. Okay, so I've got that one now. I'm pretty happy with the back of it and everything. And as you can see, if I'm just pulling it away, it helps release it a little bit, but then I want to press underneath as I push up. And there we go, a 3-layered color. As I said before, I am going to be showing you how to fill with liquid clay. Now, liquid clays, you are a little bit limited with your colors unless you're mixing liquid clay yourself. I've just gotten the garnet metallic and white today, just to fill in this same one that we just did with the standard polymer clay. Now, I am going to try and do a two-tone with this one, so we're going to see how we go. So I first like to encapsulate that second color just to try and avoid much spillage out from the sides, but it is a lot more difficult with liquid clay than standard polymer clay. And to try and smooth this one over, I'm just going to be taking a silicone tool. Now, in terms of embedding with liquid clay, if I tried to embed into this liquid clay section here, my post would just kind of sink and not sit straight. So you can't really embed straight into liquid clay without a lot of difficulty. So what we do instead is we have standard polymer clay, and then we pop our earring post on the top wherever we want it, and then we're actually just going to cover it with liquid clay. Now, I did say before that you are limited in colors, so unless you're actually mixing this color into a liquid clay, you're a little bit limited with what you're going to pop on the top. So I'm actually just going to be putting a clear liquid clay on top. So we've just finished these ones. I've got my liquid clay and my embedded liquid clay. I'm just going to pop them in the oven and we'll come back when they're baked. Okay, I've got my mould out of the oven, and as you can see, they're nicely baked. The clear liquid clay is very, very clear, so it's great for any backings that you need to do. And this one here that we did the two-tone with, you can see a little bit of leakage out there, but we managed to encapsulate most of it within the little center circle. And again, super, super flexy. They're a little bit more flexy than regular polymer clay just because they have got a little bit of added softener in them to make them liquid clay. But those are our liquid clay pieces. Thank you so much for watching the video today. I hope you found it helpful, and if you are a seasoned polymer clay artist, I hope I taught you at least one thing today that you maybe didn't know previously about working with silicone molds. Now, of course, if you do make anything with silicone molds, we would love to see them out in the wild, so don't forget to tag us on socials and we'll go and check it out. As always, we would love for you to like and subscribe so we can keep bringing you more of these informative videos, and we will see you next time.